This video is going to show you Solar Flawless Ghost of the Deep dungeon during the Season of the Witch on a Titan. Reason for this video is because a couple of people have asked for Ghost of the Deep runs this particular season, because people are still struggling with it. And I figured that I would do a Titan run because a lot of Titan mains have asked for this, more so than other classes from what I've noticed. I still think Warlock and Hunter do a better job with Ghost of the Deep than a Titan does, apart from maybe a Strand Titan for the first boss, which is best in slot for that boss, for Echtar. And the Solar Titan's obviously really good as well, but the Warlock and the Hunter has better kit, in my opinion, for this dungeon. That's why I'm doing it per se on the worst class, to help people who still haven't got the Emblem, what have you. Now, I do recommend that you do go on Strand for the first boss. The reason why I haven't is because I want my video to be uniform. What I mean by that is, once I pick a build, I want to not change that build as much as possible for the entire run. And I really wanted to do Void Titan for the final boss, which meant I'm going to do it for the first boss as well. It's to note, if you're good enough with Strand Titan, you can solo 2-phase the first boss, which is insane. And if you don't solo 2-phase, then it's a 3-phase. With Tractor Cannon, with Shotgun, etc. So, if that's bothering you, that fight, then go Strand Titan. But I think going on to the final boss, the build that I end up using, well, the Void Titan build that I'm using, actually does decent. It will surprise you how good it does. It's actually decent because of the setup and stuff, which I'll talk more about when we get to the first boss. So the mechanics of this initial encounter, which I've sped up just for editing purposes, because there's nothing much to this encounter, the video is long enough as it is that you need to kill an ogre, follow the trail, right, which there's a pattern to the trails if you didn't know, so I know all of them off by heart, of course. You then crush your ghost off your Hive Guardian, you remember the symbol, and then you dunk the correct symbol when you come back here, and that's literally all there is to it. Xenophage is a top pick in this because you can just one-tap the wizards and move on like so, right? So, very easy. Be careful of the moths, but they ain't going to one-shot you from full HP. You should have double arc resist on to counter these. I haven't got concussive dampener on, which I'll tell you why I haven't. Because something's happened since last season, which I didn't know about. I'll tell you about it when I get to the first boss. But yeah, you're just rinsing and repeating of what you're doing here. Obviously, I've got a Devour chain going, so I'll use that when possible. Stay alive. We're on Bubble Titan, so we're not using the Roman Super. It's all about Bubble for this. So yeah, that's the first boss fight. Sorry, the first encounter. I'll return when we get to the first fight. So for editing purposes, I cut out the traversal sections in this dungeon because there's nothing I can tell you about them, about those sections and give you help with, because it's basically just running through, right? So if you don't know where to go, then chances are you haven't run this dungeon yet. You should be going running that now blind to see what you think of it. This video is for people who already know the dungeon but need help with the Solar Flawless. And as I said, there's been a lot of Titans ask for Ghost of the Deep this season, so I will say, like I said earlier, the Strand Titan's obviously the best class for this because you can solo 2-phase easily, or for most of you solo 3-phase, because the 2-phase is quite tight, but a 3-phase is doable for everybody. So if you want a quicker fight, you're going to save 10 minutes, if I'm being honest, because it takes 2 to 3 minutes per phase. So you're not going to save that much time if you solo 3 phase, as opposed to this run. The only thing with this run, it should have been a 4 phase, and I was sort of robbed of it in a sense. I was really unlucky, but this class is able to solo 4 phase easily, providing that you do everything as you should. And there was one phase that I didn't quite do what I should. I was a bit impatient, which you'll see at the end what happened. But this class is good because it has access to buffs and debuffs very easily. So Echo of Undermining via your grenades and Weapons of Light via your bubble. Those two stacked together means that you're doing quite sizable Lament damage to the boss, which that will be with strongholds. This build I'm using is with Sympaceps, with a Devour Chain, and then pairing that with the Glaive. So obviously Glaive works with Sympaceps to a degree. I know that they've sort of limited how it does work, but don't worry about it. Don't look into those details too much. It's fantastic. A Glaive with Sympaceps on a Titan is very good. And you're seeing the gameplay now and how good it actually is. Not only that, the damage distance that you get when you put up your frontal shield is still crazy in PvE. It's just something that where you can keep your Devour Chain going really well. And you can nade every wizard because I've got Offensive Bulwark on. That's the play. Rather than using Controlled Demolition, which is a good fragment. It's actually a fantastic fragment. But I think Offensive Bulwark's easier because when you have your Overshield, you get more grenade energy. Like a lot more grenade energy. So you've got to answer the question to yourself. Do you want to spam more grenades with debuffs, or do you want to throw less grenades with the detonators? That's the question you've got to ask yourself. And the question when I asked that question to myself, no, I need more debuffs. So Offensive Bulwark is better than Code of the Commander. It used to be called that. Sorry. Controlled Demolition in this case because I can debuff all 3 wizards, which is more powerful than just having detonators every now and then for this particular section. See, that's an issue that I see is people build craft, right, but they don't really understand it because they just think that this is the go-to build for this or that, but you need to build craft for the activity that you're in. Now, if you can't differentiate a activity from another and notice the strengths and weaknesses from a fragment as opposed to another fragment, and recognizing that another fragment might be slightly better than the one that you usually run sometimes, then that's because you lack understanding of what the actual fragment does in the first place, rather than just using somebody's dim links. I would actually tell you to stop using people's dim links. I provide dim links, but let's face it, it's a little lazy, isn't it? Like, I can provide you dim links, but you're being lazy there. You should be going in your orbit there and checking your fragments and really understanding what you're doing. If you just get a dim link off somebody, give me the dim link for the best Briarbinds build. Well, you're lazy because you haven't read the fragments, you haven't understood why the guys put this build on or that build. You should be doing it yourself. But I do provide them because I know people do get fed up of having to equip this, that and the other. So I do provide the dim links for you. But I'm just saying, if you really, really want to learn on build crafting per se, you should be micromanaging your build crafting per activity, not every week. Not once a week. It should be per activity that you do. Right? So it's like, would this fragment be slightly better than that one? And if you can answer the questions correctly, then that means you really understand it. If you're somebody that's just, well, I'm just going to use this fragment the entire time because I just want to, then that's a bit more of, that's a you problem more than the game, because you're just not wanting to swap stuff because you can't be bothered. You've got to really be proactive about your builds. I change my builds all the time. That's why you'll see me sometimes get mods wrong, because I'm proactively looking at stuff all the time. But you saw the first phase of damage, which is decent with Lament. It's decent. There was no mistakes made. Everything went as it should. There is one phase I make a mistake, which cost me the 4 phase, like I said earlier. Whenever you start ad clear, a fresh after DPS, That's when it's quite dangerous. Well, this isn't after DPS, but when it is, make sure you start off with your Devour Chain. I've got different mods on to get me orbs. So I've got Firepower, and I've got Heavy Handed on. So I'm making orbs via 2 abilities to get my armor charges, because you obviously want your 4 stack of armor charges per DPS phase. 3 wouldn't be enough, because by the time you swap and run over there and kill a knight and stuff, you end up running out of surges, which can make a difference for damage. Because remember, surges stack with bubble. So make sure that you've got plenty of armor charges with your build. Obviously, we're going to glaive a lot. The glaive works out really well for survivability. In this dungeon in general, glaive's just one of the best weapon types, and I've been using glaives in this dungeon for quite a bit. We'll do our surge switch here, then we'll just reproc a couple of health kills with the glaive, because obviously it works with Echo of Legion, the fragment on Void Titan. We'll do what we need to do with the knight. Melt with Lament. Don't worry about your ammo cost or anything. Your goal is to kill that knight as quickly as possible. Then bubble. Debuff with nade in advance. Pre-charge Lament. And then do your Lament combos. Now, the Lament combos, the standard for what people ask or tell people, the best Lament damage is 2 light, 1 heavy. That isn't the case for the Stronghold Titan. You can sometimes do more than that. You might be able to fit in 3 light, 1 heavy. Or you'll be definitely fitting in 4 light, 1 heavy at the start of your DPS curve. But as the DPS curve goes on, you have less and less sword energy. So then you start to do the 2 light, 1 heavy. So you can see how I progressively went from 4 to then 3 light, 3 light, 1 heavy. Then it was down to 2 light, 1 heavy at the very end to maximize damage at the back end. So because I've got strongholds on, the 2 light, 1 heavy rule doesn't apply to me because I have increased sword recharge. If I didn't have strongholds on, then the 2 light, 1 heavy rule that people say would apply, and that you should be doing that. Apart from the first Lament combo you do should be max light, because you've got full sword energy, so you may as well do it. Do you get it? That way you get more damage in as a result. But it doesn't matter too much, because even if you optimize like I did, I still 5-phased. It was meant to be a 4, but that's what I'm on about. If you do make one little mistake, you end up having to do 1 extra phase. But it's no big deal on this boss fight, because it's 2 to 3 minutes per phase. So this fight's fine. Alright, this boss has a lot of HP, but the mechanics aren't too difficult for you to quickly do. It's more of a problem when you get to the farm boss. That's where you really, really do need to optimize your damage. And make sure what you're doing at damage is correct, because if you fumble damage, all the mechanics and all the enemies you have killed are sort of wasted. Because if you've only done half damage that you should have done, you're going to have to do more phases, which means it's far riskier. The longer this dungeon goes on, the increased chance of death. Fatigue, it's an endurance dungeon. It's the longest dungeon in the game to solo flawless, hands down. So you can bet an hour and 25 minutes in, you're going to be tired. You just want it over. You want to knock the game off. You just want to get your solo flawless and knock it off. You get tired because of the boss's HP and stuff. So you really want to do optimize your damage. But for the first boss, it's not too bad. All right, it doesn't feel too long. It's the farm boss that feels long. So yeah, this Void Titan that I showcased, it is doing well in this for survivability. I'm getting plenty of debuffs. I'm killing all the enemies, getting health regen with a Devoured Chain. It's doing everything that I want it to do. My complaint about it is, well, it's a complaint about the game in general. And not a lot of people are going to like this, but people don't like the truth. And the truth of it is, they need to buff Bubble. And they need to buff Bubble in PvE so that it has a higher damage than Well of Radiance. Well of Radiance is a 25% buff. Weapons of Light is a 25% buff. They made it the same. This never used to be the case. Bubble had 10% more than Well at some point. I can't remember what life cycle, what time in the game that was, but that was a thing at one time. Bubble used to be a higher buff than Well. They then changed it so that they're both the same. in my opinion, that was the day when bubble started to go down in power, when they done that. Because think about it, a well of radiance, you can sit in that well very easily and shoot a boss. There's no need to strafe. There's no need to do anything other than shoot your gun at boss. With a bubble, alright, you've got to strafe in and out of that bubble for your weapons. Right? You can't shoot out of the bubble, because then that would make the bubble broken. So, what they need to do is make bubble a higher buff again. Give it a 10% bonus compared to well, to balance it out. This would work because people would still use well, because well of ease of use. So the trade-off is well's easier to use, bubble is harder to use, but it gives you a higher damage buff. Most people in raids don't need extra 10% anyways outside of day 1 experiences. So I feel as though it's okay to do that. So bubble, what I'm saying they need to do is buff it to 35% and leave bubble as it is right now. And I think that would be good, because when there's times in the game you want to run bubble over a warlock, that might come up, and that's what the game should be like. It shouldn't be I just want a warlock. Look at LFG. Everyone wants warlocks on LFG. It's for good reason, because well, no, we shouldn't have it like that. Bubble Titan should also be a fantastic support class in the game, not just well. And it is a problem, and it has griped me. But the reason why I'm doing Void Titan this season is because last season the famous exotic helmet, Helm of Same 14, stopped working. Well, it wasn't last season it stopped working. It didn't work for 3 seasons. I estimate it's 3 to 4 seasons it didn't work. So, if you don't know what Helm of Same 14, it gives you an overshield when you strafe in outside of your bubble. Nowadays, that's not needed that much. But funnily enough, the funny story is, it's actually extremely valuable at the final boss fight in this dungeon. It is, you'll see it, because when you're strafing out your bubble, you get an overshield. It didn't work, it was bugged. So you were gonna see a Void Titan run off me last season, and I refrained from doing it because I was mad that Helm of Same 14 was bugged. It's now been fixed. When it was fixed, I have no idea. I don't know. I would like to know. Well, I'm not bothered actually. It's fixed. So I love this build for the final boss as well. Just obviously it's a long fight as it is. So we're on our final phase. Well, this should have been our final phase. We just end up. What ends up happening, you'll see in a minute. I have to panic bubble. So one mistake leads to another one, because I end up panic bubbling. I end up being impatient with my damage, impatient with the phase, and not waiting for super. I end up starting the damage rotation with no bubble, or just getting it in time, but that one small mistake of losing 5 seconds of damage costs the 4 phase. So, but I wasn't going to go to orbit and redo it. What's the point? I wasn't going to do that, so I just continue with the run and it ended up being so flawless. So we'll get our 3 symbols. Obviously, make sure that in the water that you're doing your routing. I haven't really talked too much about routing, but you should know all the symbols off by heart. Alright? That's something that you should know. But this run is for somebody who already knows the mechanics. You just need extra little help with combat and stuff like that. This was close, so it was close. Now the reason for that, I bubbled there just in case, was I didn't have close to melee procced, which procs via a ranged attack by the Glaive. So I made a mistake of not doing that and not realising, and this is what I was on about before I said it. So if you take longer at killing your wizard with a Glaive, there's a chance of death, and there was there. That's why I bubbled. Now what I should have done is not kill the wizards, farmed up some enemies for super, then started to kill them. I thought that I would have had enough super energy for phase 4, but I was just shy. You'll see it's very close. I'm halfway there now, so I thought I'll be good by now once I clear an extra couple of ads. But my Vestige of Light buff on the left hand side is low on time, so I've literally got 30 seconds to get half a super. So then I was like, oh right, I haven't got enough time for a bubble. So that means I'm going to have to do without a bubble for this phase. But then I looked at the HP of the boss and saw that, oh, I've got enough damage in me, even with no bubble. But that's 25%, so it's sizable. I do end up bubbling, just it's not right away. We're 8 seconds on Vestige. I've done my third switch. We then go over. I hope that the knight would give me my bubble back, and he almost does. So close. We have to block with Lament for his attack. We'll go with debuff. Get our Lament swings in, then bubble. But he knocks us back as well. So that combination of us not having a bubble right away and getting knocked back cost the forfeit. So you can see though that this class is decent for this first boss. It isn't no Strand Titan. I admit that. But it is decent for survivability. It's really fun to play with for when you're killing the knights and stuff with the nades and the wizards. And yeah, it's generally decent overall. We'll just speed up the final phase. So you can see he's got no HP at all. So yeah, you can see. So it's like dominoes. You make one little mistake, it leads to another. And before you know it, that's how deaths happen, by the way, as well. When when you watch people play, when they're trying to, maybe people on Twitch who are maybe not as skilled, the low end people, lower end in terms of skill, but they're just streaming and stuff, and you watch their runs and you see they're dying over and over in a certain section. It's generally because of overcommitment and not realizing risk of death before it happens. What you need to start realizing is risk of death before it happens. And it's hard to teach that to somebody, because what I'm saying sounds a little absurd, doesn't it? I'm asking you to know before you're going to die. And that's difficult, but it's if you watch the absolute best players, they will know that they're in trouble before they are. Vendetta is a big one for that. If you ever watch Vendetta, he always knows when he's in trouble before he is, because you can tell by whatever he's saying at that time, right? Especially when he's doing the solo GMs. So that particular skill or that trait I'm on about is, I don't think you can teach it. You've got to teach it. You've got to teach it yourself. You've got to watch other players and then do challenges yourself, and then start to realize, all right, this is probably why I'm dying, because I'm doing this or I'm not doing that. But that was the commentary for the first boss, and I'll obviously skip out the traversal section and then go with the final boss as well. Okay, so with the final boss, our build is the same as before in terms of Symphoceps, Void Titan, Bubble, etc. But our weapons are wildly different. So now we've got on Stormchaser for DPS, Riskrunner the exotic SMG for damage resistance, because the boss does arc. So Riskrunner is literally best in slot for this. And then a Riptide Stacy Fusion Rifle on for dealing with knights and Hive Guardians and stuff like that. So for every phase, at the start of every phase, obviously this is phase 1, always clear your knights first. That is the golden rule. They will only respawn per phase. So I guess I'm going to remind you of the spawns, because obviously I've covered this dungeon to death last season, but obviously this season I haven't really covered it that much. I mean, we did have a run up at the start of this season, but we haven't done much since then. So really just reminding you on the enemy spawns and stuff like that. So there's a couple of golden rules that you've got to follow, especially when you're on a class like this. When you're on a slightly weaker class, there's some rules that you must follow. So your first rule is clear your knights. Your second rule is assess HP when going for deep sight. When you go for deep sight, it locks you in position. So if you're already half HP or less, you might want to consider maybe doing a devoured chain kill first, then go for deep sight. So that's your golden rule 2. obviously then establish the link, the chain. I'm not going to go over the mechanics too much, but remember when you're doing the chain, what I'm doing now, you can never start from middle. That is the only rule with it. So you can start with whatever. So the chain's obviously random on what you get, but you can never start with middle first. You can do middle second or last. But don't be shy to use a bubble on this phase because of how long a phase takes. It takes 8 to 9 minutes per phase. You're going to get 2 supers in that time, no problem. So if there's times when you want to bubble and lock down a zone to kill a knight, by all means do it. But remember how useful your Bastion barricade is for this. Like right now I'm going to use it. My Devour Chain's going to run out. We've actually got it going, that's fine. But if it does run out, for example, then the overshield will help us survive. So yeah, this class performs well, especially with Riskrunner. Riskrunner is just the what really makes it decent. Without Riskrunner, then this build would suffer for survivability. You might then want to use the Void exotic Glaive, Excalibur, which it's a Void Overshield Glaive, which actually is really good and would be a nice pair with this. So, but obviously with the damage distance that Riskrunner provides and the ag clear potential and the orbs that you can make with it and the Devour Chain that you can do with it, it makes it the best in slot. But if you weren't going to use Riskrunner, then I recommend Excalibur because of the overshield. You can have infinite overshields with it. It works really well on a Void subclass. So now we've done the main mechanic. I always establish, this is rule number 3. Establish what middle is. The symbol. Whatever the middle symbol is, you don't destroy the Hive Guardian for that middle symbol. So I don't know what the middle symbol was out there, but I don't think it's the one that I've got in here. But if it was, you just prep your room. So I'm a big believer in Ghost on prepping your acolytes, prepping your Hive Guardians, getting them weak, and you know, instead of just aimlessly killing everything, be smart, clever about the enemy spawns and know exactly what you're doing. The biggest reason why people die in Ghost of the Deep is because they don't understand how to DPS on this final boss. They don't understand how the acolytes work. They just think it's ads and that's it, and that they just keep coming out. They do. That is half true, but that's not the whole truth, is it? You can manipulate spawns. You can make things easier, which I'm going to tell you exactly what I do when we get to that phase on how to make sure that when you do DPS the boss, it's just you and the boss for a good chunk of time. The DPS phase is around 45 to 50 seconds you get, which is a lot of time, but the boss is very tanky, and soloing this boss can take you quite a number of phases if you're not on strand. So that's even with debuffs and buffs, because like I'm stacking a lot together. I'm stacking surges, a bubble, a debuff, all that together. Heavy ammo, like spamming it, and still taking quite a number of phases. So we've prepped the solar, right, because that was the middle symbol. So it would have been a mistake there if I'd killed the Solar Hunter, the Hive Guardian, that is. I refer that as the Hive Guardian, the Solar Hunter, and then the Wizard's just the Wizard, and then Sentinel is the Void, of course. I usually have a structure on that as well. I always do Void, Solar, Arc. That is my rotation. I do it no matter what. Unless I'm going to die, then I'll maybe seek refuge in the water, because you can do that. If you're about to die, quickly strafe to the water section. You get overshield right away, and it saves you from dying. But generally, you should be able to navigate the map good enough so that that doesn't happen. So keep mobile. If you're just not wanting to clear ads and you're just looking to get deep sight and dunk a symbol, then really focus on the path that you take to get to deep sight, like your route around the map. You know, use your cover a little bit so the acolytes aren't hitting you that much. Like right here, I took a good route to get deep sight. My shields didn't break, they have now, but that's enough. I had enough HP to do what I needed to do there. I could have put down a Bastion barricade on the deep sight, which I should have done that more frequently, because there is a couple of close calls I had when getting deep sight. So that's probably what you should do, is pop a barricade down. But you've got to evaluate how many adds around deep sight. But if you do map rotation, the acolytes sort of follow you, so you can sort of bait them to one side of the map, and then you get your deep sight as they're sort of coming towards you, but you're out of danger before they can get towards you. Anyways, we've killed 2 Hive Guardians, and we've prepped Solar Hunter. So Solar Hunter is a 3rd HP. We haven't killed because we're going to do... we've prepped that, but we're also prepping Acolytes. So Acolytes spawn on a 45-second rotation. It's something like 45 seconds. Maybe slightly longer. So they're unlimited spawning. Right, so what does that mean? Well, that means that you wait for a fresh spawn outside, which I've just done now. So that's your first step. Wait for fresh spawn and melt them as quickly as possible. With a Devour Chain kill, with Riskrunner and melees or whatever. Right? So kill them as quickly as possible. You're speedrunner, you're trying to kill them as quickly as you can. Then you run to your Hive Guardian, whichever one that you prepped. So you need to remember that. So if it was Sentinel, you would go there. If it's Wizard, you would go there. In this case, it's Solar Hunter. Solar Hunter is prepped. Now, you need to get the sweet spot of killing the Hive Guardian, crushing the ghost, and listening for the enemy spawn. And it'll just happen just as you get back to the battlefield. If you're perfect with it, you ideally want the enemies to spawn just as you get there. Right, so don't kill your Hive Guardian right away. You need to make it. This is something that's hard to learn. You have to instinctively know, were you slow on that Acolyte kill? On those Acolytes previous to this? If you were slow, then quickly kill your Guardian. If you were too quick, wait a few seconds. But the danger is, if you go too quick, you would mess up the vestige of Acolyte buff, because once that runs out, you die. Remember that. So there's a timing to this, but you have the advantage of watching someone else do it. So it's there for you in video format. So it doesn't matter how much you are confused with it, you can replay it once or twice, that particular part, and then you'll get it. So we'll use we've done a 3rd switch before we picked up Deep Sight, right, which consists of Arbalest, Stormchaser still on, right, and then we then bubble in middle. So bubble in the side, whether it be right or left, but don't bubble middle, because then you have no room to peek out. Because you've only got so much room in middle, right? So I use right hand side, whatever. Just put it in a corner so that you can strafe, and then this is where you do your DPSing. I will say that when I was doing this at times, the boss was... well, the boss always does this. They move about, awkward to damage. That green light in front of me is doing my head in. Like, you see the green in front? It's ridiculous. Like, how bright have they got that? What's the purpose of having all that stuff on your screen? It just goes against DPS. The worst thing in this game is when you've got things, too much flashbang effects or visual effects on your screen when you're trying to DPS. This is true when you're in raids as well. When you've got some damn warlock with solar nades spamming them, you can't see your crit. Now, if someone's running div, then someone's running div, that's fine, but div's been nerfed. It's not as much as tractor cannon debuff, so you don't see that as much. So that's what I'm saying, is that when there's so much visual stuff on your screen, if you're missing crits, sometimes it's not your fault. And it depends on what type of boss you're up against as well. Like, this particular boss is annoying to fight, I must admit, in terms of damage. It feels satisfying when the boss sits there and you get your crits, right? But when the boss is messing around or teleporting for no reason, there's no structure to it, by the way. It's just sort of RNG. So then that means your DPS is up to RNG, because any time lost is DPS lost. And this is a big deal, especially with the amount of HP that this boss has, something like 11 million HP or whatever. So it's a huge deal that any seconds lost adds up. It all comes out, it all shows up in the end. So um, you can imagine how annoying it is, especially with the amount of mechanics that you do when you're on a class like this, and you're having nothing but the bad RNG with the boss, especially when you performed everything perfectly. I think that's why people aren't really interested in the solo flaws for this too much, because of stuff like that. Um, of the RNG of the boss movement. I mean, the DPS phase that we just pulled off was okay. It was alright. There was some crits missed, but it was alright. Obviously, we've got Helm of Same 14 on, which is doing fantastic for us, because we're able to strafe in and out of that bubble. I am running bubble as well because the Roman Sentinel Super in this is useless if you think about it. It's just because of how the boss is situated. In actual fact, I want them to buff it. The Code of the Commander, it's not called Code of the Commander, it used to be. But the Roman Sentinel Super needs buffed. It does nowhere near the damage that it should, even with Symphoceps. Alright, it's outclassed by everything else. Even Hammers outclasses it. Strand Titan almost certainly outclasses it. But yeah, it's like, I understand that they want to sell Strand this year because it's Strand's year. Just like when Beyond Light came out, it was Stasis that year. But I don't care that they want to sell Strand. I want to be able to use other things as well. And if I feel as though like Void Titan needs a buff, I'll say that it does, and I think it does. There's a few people of recent times, content creators, said they're not that too excited about Void Titan, and I can understand why, because Bubble is the same as well. What's the point in the class? The Roman Super doesn't do that good of a job. Hammers will always do better. It's got good access to debuff and buff. I will say that. That's going for it. But, it's like... It goes against it. And it's not a good thing to see. You should always have bubble somewhere there in the meta. At the very least. Because all it's going to be oh, I'm on a Titan, I'll just go Strand. Which, what's going to happen, my prediction is at Final Shape, they're going to nerf Strand again. Because, guess what, the Strand year will be over, technically. Because they still, even though we've had seasons since Lightfall, Bungie still considers this as the Lightfall era. It's not Season of the Witch area, this is era, this is just a season. They still consider it as the Lightfall era within this year, this calendar year. So they want to push Strand down your throat as much as possible, which is why Strand Surge has been up every season, because they want you to use Strand. They are desperate for you to use it. But after next year, they're going to nerf it, definitely, because they'll then want you to use whatever they've got cooked up then. Which I'm not saying there's going to be a new subclass. Some people are debating that it's going to be with the episodes, which, the red subclass. That's come up again. That topic, which who knows even if that is an actual thing. I know there was a leak of the screenshot of it, but that I'm just not a fan of them pushing down one subclass down your throat for a year. It's too long of a time. It's like, yeah, get over it. I know that Strand's come out. I know. I'm aware of it. We've been playing with it since February. I know. I like the Strand changes. I think it's fantastic. But there is a point where it comes to where it's like, well, Strand's a little bit too powerful for no reason. Just because Bungie wants you to sell. They just want to sell Lightfall to you. Do you know what I mean? It's like they're just doing it because they want, but I don't want them to just do it like that. I want them to do things what the player wants sometimes, and look at the ability usage of other elements in the game. Because I bet if you look into the stats, you'll see, like for Titans in particular, you'll see that it's probably Solar and Strand that see the most usage. Arc a little bit, but even then Arc Titan's good, by the way. Arc Titan's insane, but I don't think everybody realises how good Arc Titan is at the minute. Because obviously it was amazing last year, but they nerfed it, but it's crept up in power again, but I don't think people realise. But yeah, those are the two elements that are getting used overwhelmingly over other stuff. and you've got your support class, and I'm just saying it's not usable. It's barely usable. Is the bubble? But I'm showing you that you can use it. You're just going to be hindered a little bit in what it does. It does one job okay. It provides you a buff, safety during DPS, and this boss is threatening during damage. So we're on to the second phase. Remember, always assess when you're doing deep sight on your HP. You should be managing that at the entire time. This is a rather unique skill trait. So try to, when you're fighting enemies, to keep your eyes on your HP bar at all times. So rather than you trying to focus on your gun model and the enemies, well, try and focus on the enemies as well. But this is a good little exercise for you. Just keep an eye on your HP bar at all times on what it's doing. As your shields broke, how close are you to your shields? Are you half HP? I've got hit by this. If I get hit again, will that break my shields? Those questions. Ask yourself those questions while you're playing. It's a good exercise. I learned that in Leviathan when we done the solo on the Leviathan, the solo challenge. Well, it revolved around one guy doing the solo skulls, and then I soloed throne room. But what I'm getting at is how can you juggle enemies? How good are you at doing that whilst juggling your HP and assessing? It's the same skill as what a good PvP player has when they just look at their radar. So they look at the radar and the gunplay is background noise to them. It's the background. They're actually focusing only on the radar, a good PvP player, because then they're assessing the red, etc. But I think that skill is used in PvE, especially when on these solo raid challenges. That, I mean, I'm not involved with it now these days because I don't have time for solo raid challenges. But those players at the top echelon of skill are actually doing that. I'm telling you what they're doing. They're just looking at their HP. They're looking at their gun model as well, yeah, but their main focus is the HP. Do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? And they're constantly risk assessing when they're playing live. So they're knowing when they're in danger before it's going to happen. And knowing the moves they need to do in advance. And that skill that I've said about that before is very difficult to teach, but it's something that you need to just do yourself. You know? But you could just do that, find a hard activity and just run around the enemies and see how long you can survive. That's a good little activity to do. Because if you're somebody that's played this game for what, 7 years or whatever, and you still don't know that little trick that I've just told you about, well then what have you been doing? If you really want to be good at PvE and you're, let's say, fanatic about PvE, then why aren't you learning all this stuff that I'm on about? But people seem to get in these little comfortable zones where they're like, I'm not learning anything more. I think I'm good enough at the game. Let me just use the weapons I want to use. That's really such a bad outlook to have. Your outlook should be, well, no, how else can I improve? What can I do to improve a little bit more? You should really be watching your own gameplay as well, which, if you're on console, there's no excuse. You can record up to 60 minutes. We all can do that, and you can even do it on PS4. And that's standard PS4 as well. PS4 can do it, PS4 Pro can do it. So you can record up to 60 minutes, no device needed, no game and capture card. So anyone can analyze and look at their own content. You don't even need a laptop for it. You don't even need a separate computer. You can just save the footage and look at it. And you can analyze deaths, you can analyze DPS, you can do so much. You don't need to have a YouTube channel or whatever, or extra devices to help you do stuff. Everyone has access to it. And obviously if you're on PC, well then that's different. You've got access to everything then, haven't you? So, yeah, everybody can analyze their own footage and learn from deaths and DPS and what have you. So, I recommend that you do stuff like that, especially when a new dungeon comes out, which we are getting a new one next season, December 1st or whatever, which I'll just say here and now, I can't guarantee if I'm on that day. So I can't guarantee if I'm actually going to be on. So it might be the first time in a while where I do end up missing a dungeon launch. It'll be what it be. I mean, we can't. All of us can't dedicate our lives around D2. You can't. You can't do it like that. I'll end up getting round to it. It's just when I get round to it, I don't know. Hopefully the new dungeon's good. Obviously it's linked to the D1 rocket or whatever. I'm hoping that they switch up the DPS formula for dungeons and that they try not to stick to the same formula of what we've been doing. Do a mechanic, take down the boss's shield. Do a mechanic, do this, do that, and then rinse and repeat. I hope that they do something where Phase 1 is different to Phase 2 in terms of mechanic, or the environment's different between Phase 1 and 2, or you do DPS whilst doing mechanics at the same time so that the boss has no shield, but when you do these extra mechanics, you gain extra damage against the boss or something, and imagine that the boss chases you in some sort of area. A boss that's constantly chasing you like Trevor on 0 Hour, but not the same model, of course. It'd be like, I don't know what type of boss I could think of, but you know what I'm saying. I'm just saying the formula of how we do dungeons now is too standardized. Everything's too samey. I mean, Ghost of the Deep is actually quite different. There's a lot of mechanics in there, but it is still the same thing of boss is shielded, take down shield. You know, I guess the different thing about this was that the boss's shield didn't go down, which was actually kind of bad, because then it means you run Arbalest. So it is different, but it's hindering the player, I think. I don't think it's a good idea having shields on bosses, unless it was like an elemental shield and it changed every phase or something like that, because we've had things like that in D1 Prison of Elders. You had bosses with different elemental shields. You had the strike, right? So you had to sort of marry up shields and communicate with your team. Solo wise, that would be kind of difficult though, because then you would have to sort of really think about what elements you're using. But I'm just saying they need to incorporate something different for this new dungeon. It needs to be different enough that we don't get bored of it, and that we're not, and also not short damage windows. The damage windows need to be longer, and don't go overkill. Ghost of the Deep was overkill for boss damage. It really was. But we've been going on that path. You know, we've had a couple of dungeons that have been high in health. Duality wasn't. Duality was perfect. I've said this in the past. Duality had the perfect amount of health. Both bosses. And the week 1 experience of Duality, you weren't one phasing them. Solo. Not week 1, not day 1. It was a solo 3-phase Katel, and it was solo 3-phase Galran. A good day 1 clear. I'm sure you know who done that. I know who done that. I remember who I watched doing that. So an extreme player, like really good player, 3-phase in day 1, week 1. Right, so for the rest of you, you better bet it'll be an extra phase. So I don't think a fight should be any more than 4 phases solo. The thing is, though, they've got to balance the HP for fire team and solo. This is why people have asked for fire team scaling for dungeons. And that could be an option for them, but they would have to. They can't just do the new dungeon fire team scale. They would have to rework every single one with the fire team scaling. But people have argued it is in the game, because it's in the game for the Witch Queen campaign and all that. I think it is for the Lightfall one as well. I think so. So it's in the game. It's a mechanic. So hey, see that little mechanic over there? Just shuffle it over to dungeons, and we'll have it for this as well. But don't make it too easy though for solo as well. Don't absolutely obliterate the HP. The HP needs to be sizable enough so that there's at least some challenge there. But on a fire team run, the HP should be massive. It should be large because you've got 3 people. You've got more opportunities for buffs and debuffs. When you're solo, right? For example, me, I've got 1 buff, my bubble. I've got 1 debuff. After that, I haven't got nothing else apart from my surges. Fire teams can space out buffs. They can space things out. They can get more damage in and sort of strategize. Solo player can't do that as good because it's just you. You're on your own. So, yeah, they need to have a look at balancing HP around fire team sizes, but don't make it so that it's easy. Because legendary, don't be fooled about the legendary Witch Queen campaign. Solo was easier than fire team on the day one experience. I know because I was there. So they didn't get it right then either. It was a good idea, but they didn't get it right. If you don't believe me, go back and watch the footage and you'll see people were soloing it easy, the final boss, compared to a fire team. Fire team was like, you got to strategize bubbles, wells, this weapon, galley, whatever it might be. Solo, you just a couple of controverse void nades, and you're done. And a couple of novas, and the boss is then they're dead. That's it. So, yeah, they haven't got that quite right, and I suppose it's a difficult thing of balancing it, but they need to playtest. I don't know what their playtesting setup is, but they should have people playtesting these dungeons, solo and fire team, to say, right, what's this like? Get their best players in the studio, whoever that is. Get them to play it. I hope that they do that, because I don't want us to be playtesting it and telling them. Well, even if that does happen, like look, we Ghost of Deep, people have asked for nerfs for the HP pulls of these bosses, and they haven't even made one comment about it, which says to me they don't want to do that, lest they would have done, because people were thinking it was bugged. People were thinking that this can't be right. This boss can't. These bosses can't have that much HP. They must do, because they haven't made one comment about it since the launch of the dungeon. So they want it like this. And the funny thing about it is, we can't over level it. Well, you can up to 20 levels, but even with the 20 levels over, right, it isn't making that much difference. So it's not turning a 5 phase into a 3 phase or something. If you were, because when the dungeon came out, I'd done it under leveled, and I was 4 or 5 phasing when I was under leveled, and then I got 20 levels above, and then I redone it, and the damage phase was barely any different. That was last season. I was so shocked. I was like, why have I even over leveled, expecting to do way more damage? So the scaling's so weird on this dungeon. It's almost like, yeah, you can over level it by 20, but the gains aren't that much more, unless you're using, Briar's Contempt and stuff like that, because they have that OP trait that does more damage to Guardians, and these bosses are classed as Guardians. Alright, if you're using something like that, then alright, it all adds up in the end. But if you're just using a stock loadout like RB and a linear, then your damage is going to be like 2.5 mil per phase. That's it. That's about it. Now, if you're on Arc Warlock, right, well, your DPS might creep up a bit, because I've showcased how good Arc Warlock is in this, and I'm an advocate of it because of how much Chaos Reach does, especially if you can get a debuff off. If you can debuff the boss with Rapid Fire Ranger, then Chaos Reach, you melt them with Chaos Reach. But Bubble, all it's giving is damage to your weapons. That's all it's doing for you. So a class like this is going to, suffer, but it is showing you a different outlook on it. I'm not going to do a comment on the entire run because it's so long, the fight. But you can see that I'm following my routine that I've said from the start. To talk about the moths a little bit, because I haven't talked about those, and I've really got nothing much else to talk about, so I can talk about those. What you need to understand about moths, they do spawn in every phase from the boss. They also spawn in with some of the ads. So there's two places they come from. The boss, when you do the mechanic, right, every time, but you can instantly kill them, the moths, so that they don't attach themselves to enemies, which I recommend that you try and do that if it's safe to do it. And they also spawn in with the ads. Riptide will take, if you Riptide an enemy, like a knight or something, it's counted as a shield, so the moth will detach from the enemy. But you need to understand the AI of the moth, because they have an AI pattern. So if there's like 10 or 20 acolytes, alright, loads of moths, if you're melting them with whatever your abilities are, don't be frightened if the moths are going to chase you, because they're not. What they're going to do is they first establish if there are any acolytes alive. Any enemies at all. So if there's 4 moths, right, they're all going to try and attach. So if you keep detaching a moth to another enemy, they're just going to keep flying to the next enemy. If there's no more enemies alive and there's 4 moths, then they will enrage on you. So that's their second directive, if you like. First step is to establish, is there any other enemies I can attach myself to? If the answer is no, they chase you. That means that you can be lazy with them and you don't need to shoot them every time. Riskrunner makes a short work of them, but you'll see at times I'll be like, why am I not shooting them off? Well, because they're going to just attach to another one anyways, and my abilities and the arc from Riskrunner will probably kill them. If I need to take attention to them, then I'll start to shoot them down. But only when needed. I'm not going to waste my time with them if I know that there's like loads of acolytes. They're just going to seek another acolyte. Your main focus is getting the ads down quicker, because once all the ads are down, you can have full attention to take down all the moths as good as you want. So they can wipe your run as well. Like if 4 moths hit you all at once, that will be a death. That will be a death. But I think you can out tank 2 or 3 with Riskrunner double arc resist and stuff. I haven't got concussive dampener on because I need 4 stacks of armor charge. The problem is concussive dampener sits in the armor charge slot, which is on the well, yeah, it's one of the slots it sits in. But last season, when we were doing the surge switch, and you could actually rock a concussive dampener on your second DPS build, and on your first build you could use charged up. Basically, you didn't have to use charge up twice on both builds, but you would still maintain 4 stacks of armor charge. That's not the case anymore. If you rock the charged up and then a concussive dampener on the second, you lose a stack automatic when you swap to it. So they've done that at some point. That's been a stealth fix, right? They've fixed that. So at some point they've stopped that. So what it means is you can't run concussive dampener if you want 4 stacks of armor charge. Simple as that. So you just have to settle for double arc resist, which is enough if you're using Riskrunner, because concussive dampener does have a whole host of benefits, which I'm not going to go into too much now, but it is insane what it does. It's just a shame that I can't run it like I did last season, because that's what we was doing. Is we would still have 4 stacks of armor charge, but I had a concussive whilst DPSing, which is nice. But I guess we've got Helm of Saint on, which it means the DPS phase is entirely safe, completely safe, which it is on other classes like Solar. But obviously, I'm not going to showcase a subclass that you've seen the runs. If you're an avid viewer of watching Solar Flawless Dungeons, you've seen the Solar Titan run. Why do you need me to redo it with Solar Titan? What are you getting from it? You're not getting anything from it, really, are you? If I run a Void Titan run, you're going to click it and think, well, how the hell you doing Void Titan? What did you use? And then you click on it, and that's what the idea of the run is. It's to get you to at least click. Fair enough if you don't watch it all, and I don't expect you to, but it's to get people to be motivated and to ask questions. Whereas if I run what everyone else runs, then you have no questions, because chances are you've already asked someone about it, right? So what's the point? There's got to be a point, and there's generally is a point to my runs, generally, with anything that I do. But if I haven't got much time that week, then it could be just a stock run, a stock loadout build or whatever that you see other people run. So it just depends on how much time I have. So this week I've had a little bit more time, so I've done a Void Titan run on Ghost. So just depends. You can notice I'm not suffering for ammo as well in this, so that's good. But we're only really using it for DPS anyways. There is sometimes when you're doing the mechanic where I will mow down. This was quite close actually. I had a bubble here. So that's what I'm saying. Don't be frightened to bubble if you think you may die like that, because we're going to get a bubble back for DPS anyways. Got stuck on the scenery here a little bit. Just shows you how crazy the resistance you get from Riskrunner in general. We're on the latter phases, so his HP, if you look at the HP there, we should do that in 2 phases comfortable, very easily. So that's actually a good amount, because the reason why that's decent is because on the final phase, if we have a good phase now coming up, then our final phase there won't be much HP, which is good because you've got to get a finisher kill on that final phase. So not having a lot of HP on your final phase, if you've only got 10 or 15%, that's actually decent, because it means you can get a finisher kill without dying, without acolytes being alive, because you'll be ahead of your DPS rotation with the acolyte spawning, like I explained earlier. Because of that rotation of acolyte, you're just DPSing the boss, so it's just you and the boss, which obviously makes it a hell of a lot easier. It's harder when there's adds up, but with the Solar and the Solar Titan and the Arc Hunter, those runs, generally you keep those adds up anyways, because you sort of use them for your buffs. And especially Solar Titan, you just sit in your sunspot, so you can sort of kind of ignore them a little bit. On this run you wouldn't, because they'd flinch you, and flinch is a big problem. So that's another reason you'll lose so much damage because of flinch. So that's another reason why it's good just to have enemies killed during DPS. Always micromanage each room as well. Like right now I needed a double orb. There's no arc in this room, so make sure I get my Devour chain. Like if we're going to kill. Riptide also can freeze these Guardians. I think we're prepping this one. I haven't really talked too much about the Guardians, but the most dangerous one is the Solar. Well, Sentinel's quite dangerous as well. The Wizard's easier, the easiest of them all. But the Sentinel one, if 2 shields hit you, you can die. So I've seen people lose flawless runs to the Sentinel, so don't be too cocky with the Sentinel. If you're going to push the Sentinel whilst there's a super active, freeze with Riptide, just to slow him up a little bit, and play cover so that you don't get hit by the shields. The Solar one, play to cover when they do the Blade Barrage. The Arc one, very easy because you got Riskrunner on, so it's really self-explanatory. So now we wait for now we do our acolyte routine. We'll wait for the phase. It's good doing this, because if I hadn't done this, right, what would happen is that 45-second timing would be different. So if I just went and killed the Hive Guardian now while there's no adds up, right, then what may happen is you might, so say the DPS window for this boss is 45-50 seconds. So say you get to 20 seconds in. If an Acolyte wave spawns at 20 seconds in of your damage will be ruined on a build like this. On a build that doesn't have sunspots or what have you. So that's why you want to do this. It makes the entire run longer. I'm sure you can say that. It will do. But showing you this technique will help people understand how to actually DPS this boss properly, rather than it being just people just going in there and randomly trying to do it. Like you hear people say, "Oh, I'll try tonight." Well, you don't need to try if you know, because you'll just get it done then, won't you? If you know exactly how it works, especially when a dungeon first comes out, before going for flawless, before trying your hand at luck, you need to learn everything about the dungeon first, so that it's like the back of your hand. Now, the good players can get it done in a day and memorize it and get it done within a day or two, right? The solo flawless. Those are the best players. The best players are who can do things the quickest in learning. Some of you can't do that. It's a difficult skill, like I've said. But that doesn't mean that you can't, right? Don't worry about everyone else. It's like when this new dungeon comes out, don't worry about everybody else. Worry about yourself and what you need to learn. So you need to know every single thing. So you need to ask yourself, right, I need to know the enemy spawns, right? Research it up. Or do some testing yourself, right? How does this work? How does that work? Before you even attempt your soul false, you're not even thinking about it. What you're thinking about, you're wanting to know is how does this dungeon, how does it work on the inside? What's the mechanics of it? What can I do to manipulate enemy spawns during DPS? What would be the best loadouts for this? You obviously play the meta on your day one dungeons. You do. You don't mess around day ones or day twos because your focus is to get your first clear. After that, then you can mess around with it once you get your emblem. But these are the sort of questions you need to ask rather than just trying to do it and then getting fed up with yourself and say, oh, I can't do it for this reason or that reason. You probably can't do it because there's something that you're missing, and it generally is the enemy spawns or understanding how DPS works. I remember with Spy the Watcher when that launched, people were confused on how to DPS the Riven. Didn't understand it. Like solo wise, how do you even do it? I remember when I first went in, like how am I was on a solar Titan with a rocket. It's like, well, linear's no good because the crit spot's awkward. The machine gun would be no good, right? So what we're using, rockets. Heavy GLs aren't good enough, right? Probably with a horde then. So this is the questions that you need to ask when you get a new dungeon boss, when you're faced with a new activity is, what's the go-to for this? But I will say, whenever you're up against awkward bosses, generally Xenophage and Grand Overture are king for that because they don't require crit damage. So if you are up against a boss that is weak to explosive damage, then your Xenophages and stuff like that are your go-to option. So don't always be thinking about precision damage and I should be having Cataclysmic on with bait and switch, I should be having this on or that on, right? It just depends on the boss. So like this boss, it's precision style damage that you really want to do, mainly, isn't it? I know the Strand Titan's mental, but the Strand Titan's mental on everything. So that's what you need to ask is, what type of boss are you up against? And does that boss even have a route? Like Perseus has a route, comes out of that door and then attacks you. This boss doesn't attack you in that same manner, it just floats in the air. So, you know, susceptible to precision damage, you can bubble well, Roman style super, you know, stuff like that. That was actually close, that there. But I've sped up the footage from here because that's really, literally, there's nothing else I can really tell you about this fight. I think I'll end the commentary there, but that was the Soul Flawless for this. Hope you enjoy. Thank you.